Just before 6 a.m. on June 2, 2017, an emergency 999 call hits Manchester police. On the line is an 18-year-old student rugby player, panicked, saying he woke up in a stranger's flat to find a man assaulting him, so he fought back. Hard. When officers arrive, they see a muscular young man with blood on his hands and a smaller man lying on the floor, barely conscious. To them, it looks simple. The young man is the attacker. They arrest the young man on suspicion of assault and rush the injured man to hospital, believing he's the victim. But when detectives examine the injured man's phone to piece together what happened, they uncover extensive recorded evidence of serious sexual offenses. The man in the hospital bed isn't an innocent victim at all. He is Reynhard Sinaga, the student who would soon be described as one of the most prolific sexual offenders in British legal history, with evidence involving well over 200 men, many of whom had no idea what had been done to them. This is the story of Reynhard Sinaga, and I need to warn you, this case is disturbing in ways that are hard to process, not just because of what he did, but how he did it, how he blended into everyday life, how he turned basic human kindness into a weapon, and how he operated for so long that, even now, police believe around 60 men may have been victims and still haven't come forward. By the end of this video, you'll see exactly how a predator can hide behind a friendly smile, how he singled out vulnerable men, why so many never reported what happened, and how one victim's awakening finally exposed what investigators believe was roughly a decade of abuse. Most importantly, you'll see how this case forced a country to confront something it almost never talks about: male sexual assault. So let's go back to the beginning. Let's talk about who Reynhard Sinaga was, where he came from, and how a soft-spoken student from Indonesia became the man prosecutors would later call the most prolific rapist in British legal history. Because understanding how he operated and why he got away with it for so long starts with understanding the mask he wore, the persona that made everyone around him think he was just a harmless, friendly guy who couldn't hurt anyone. That mask was very, very convincing. Reynhard Tambos Maruli Tua Sinaga was born on February 19, 1983, in Jambi, Indonesia, and grew up in Depok near Jakarta in a comfortable, upper-middle-class family. His father was a successful banker who later moved into the palm oil business. Money was not a problem, but expectations were. His family were Batak Christians, traditional, church-going, conservative. As the eldest son, Reynhard was expected to be the responsible one, build a career, support his siblings, get married, have children. There was one problem. From a young age, Reynhard knew he was gay. In a country where both conservative Christian and Islamic values dominate, that wasn't something he felt he could say out loud. So he learned to hide, to perform, to be what his family wanted to see. In 2007, he got his chance to leave. At 24, he moved to the UK on a student visa and enrolled at the University of Manchester. For the first time, he could live openly in a city with a thriving gay village. For the first time, he didn't have to pretend, but the freedom he found there, the double life it allowed, would eventually twist into something much darker. One thing defined Sinaga's life in the UK: he never stopped being a student. He completed a master's in urban planning in 2009. Then he went straight into another master's in sociology, finishing in 2011. In 2012, he started a PhD at the University of Leeds. His dissertation topic? Sexuality and everyday transnationalism among South Asian gay and bisexual men in Manchester. People who knew him said the thesis sounded like it was really about him, his world, his nightlife, his social circle. When he finally submitted it in 2016, it failed. He was given a chance to fix it and resubmit. He never did. Because for Sinaga, the point wasn't graduating. The point was staying. As long as he was enrolled, his student visa was safe. As long as his father kept paying tuition and rent, he didn't need a proper job. He could spend his 30s the same way he'd spent his 20s, studying on paper, partying at night. By the time he was arrested in 2017, he'd been a student in the UK for around a decade. Friends jokingly described him as a Peter Pan figure, someone who never seemed to grow up. They had no idea what else he was using that time for. In the early 2010s, Sinaga moved into a flat in Montana House on Princess Street in Manchester city center. On one side was Chinatown, on the other, the gay village. For a man who split his time between student life, queer nightlife, and city center convenience, it looked like the perfect base. To his friends, Montana House was just convenient student housing, close to campus, close to buses and trams, close to the places they liked to go out. You could walk to bars, grab food after a night out, crash at his place if you missed the last train. What they didn't realize was that the same location that made his life easy also gave him something else: proximity. He was never far from the busiest streets, the heaviest drinking, and the constant flow of people out late at night. Exactly how he used that advantage, the way he turned the nightlife around his flat into something predatory, is what we'll get into in the next section. For now, what matters is this: Sinaga had picked a spot where his social life, his identity, and his opportunities all overlapped. So what did people see when they looked at Reynhard Sinaga? They saw someone small, neat, and unthreatening, about 5'7", with thick-rimmed glasses, a soft voice, and a constant smile. He dressed sharply, spoke fluent English, and came across as polite, chatty, even a little shy. Friends in the gay village knew him as outgoing and fun. He loved pop music, especially the Spice Girls. On social media, he posted selfies, club photos, and everyday snapshots of what looked like a typical student nightlife existence. He also went to church. Sinaga attended St. Chrysostom's, a liberal Anglican church that welcomed LGBT members. To the people around him, he looked like the stereotype of a harmless, slightly eccentric, permanent student. Nothing about his appearance or day-to-day behavior screamed danger. That was exactly the point. While Sinaga lived openly as a gay man in Manchester, his family in Indonesia had no idea. Before flying home, he would change his appearance, cut his hair shorter, tone down his style to look more traditional. Friends said he complained about the pressure he felt on those trips. Questions about when he would finish his studies, when he would come home, when he would get married. As the eldest son, expectations were clear. His mother wanted him to settle down. His father, according to friends, even tried to set him up with the daughter of an important Indonesian family living in London. From Manchester, Sinaga sent messages about how horrible his family could be, how they didn't understand him, how he dreaded going back. In Indonesia, he was the dutiful son. In Manchester, he was out, social, and free. It was a double life, and he learned to slip between those two versions of himself without anyone, on either side, seeing the whole picture. In the next section, we'll look at how he used that carefully constructed image and the nightlife outside his front door to turn the area around his flat into a hunting ground, how he chose his targets, how he got them inside, and how his method allowed him to offend again and again without being stopped. Knowing who Reynhard Sinaga was is only half the story. To understand how he got away with this for so long, we need to look at how he operated, how he chose his targets, how he approached them, and how he turned Manchester's nightlife into his hunting ground. You've already heard where he lived. Montana House on Princess Street, right in the middle of Manchester's nightlife. Most people saw that as convenience, close to clubs, close to food, close to friends. Sinaga turned it into something else, a vantage point. From his flat, he could watch the rhythms of a night out in Manchester, the queues forming before midnight, the crowds spilling onto the pavement as clubs emptied at 2, 3, 4 the morning. People slumped at bus stops, arguing with bouncers, or staggering down the road, trying to figure out how to get home. For most residents, that noise was just part of living in the city center, background chaos. For Sinaga, it was a moving catalogue of potential targets. He didn't need to travel far. When he saw someone who looked particularly vulnerable, he could be at the front door and out on the street within minutes. His hunting ground was essentially at the bottom of his staircase. So who was he looking for? Across the 4 trials, victims ranged in age from 17 to 36, with an average around 21. Many were students. Others were young professionals, people in the armed forces, a personal trainer, a chef. Different backgrounds, different social circles. They had a few key things in common. They were men, and the vast majority identified as heterosexual. To friends, Sinaga bragged about turning straight boys, treating men who didn't identify as gay or bisexual as a challenge, a kind of conquest. Psychologists who studied the case believe that, for him, this was less about attraction and more about control and humiliation, exerting power over men who would never willingly choose him. Physically, he often targeted men who looked strong, athletic, or masculine. Exactly the kind of people you wouldn't expect to be easy victims. Under normal circumstances, they probably weren't. But he wasn't approaching them under normal circumstances. He was looking for a very specific moment, when they were drunk, tired, disoriented, and alone. Sinaga usually waited outside or near clubs in the early hours, between about 2 and 5 a.m., when the night was winding down and people were at their most vulnerable. He watched for men who showed particular signs. Someone separated from their friends and clearly looking around, confused. Someone heavily intoxicated, unsteady on their feet, slurring, struggling to walk straight. Someone who'd been refused re-entry or ejected by bouncers and left on the pavement. Someone whose phone had died and who couldn't call a taxi or message friends. Someone who'd lost a wallet or card, unable to pay for transport. Someone attempting to walk a long distance home alone because they had no other option. These weren't people looking for trouble. They were people in a momentary crisis, stuck, stranded, or simply too drunk to manage the rest of the night safely. And that's exactly what made them so easy to approach. In one documented case, it took him roughly 60 seconds from first contact on the street to getting a victim to agree to go back to his flat. 1 minute between being a stranger and being inside his building. So what did he actually say? Sinaga had refined a very simple, very effective performance, the Good Samaritan. He would approach with concern and practicality, tailoring his opening line to whatever problem the person seemed to have. Every line sounds reasonable, helpful, even kind. From the victim's perspective, the calculation seemed simple. This is a small, polite guy who doesn't look threatening. His flat is nearby. He's offering a solution to the exact problem they have at that moment. Cold, no phone, no money, no way home. Many of them later said they thought something along the lines of, "If he tries anything, I can handle him." I'm bigger, I'm stronger, I'll just leave. That's exactly what Sinaga was counting on. He knew his size and demeanor made him appear harmless. He knew his friendly, slightly awkward student persona didn't match most people's idea of a dangerous offender. He weaponized that gap between how he looked and what he intended. But the luring was only the first step. Once inside that apartment, Sinaga had a system, a drink, a drug, a camera, and a routine he repeated over and over. At the center of it was a substance police believe was GHB, a date rape drug that doesn't just knock people out, but can leave them with massive gaps in their memory. In the next section, we're going inside that flat to look at what happened after the door closed and how that routine, documented on his own devices, eventually became the evidence that exposed him. The way Sinaga approached his victims was calculated, but what happened after they stepped inside his flat was even more methodical. He had a system, a routine, he repeated, again and again. And at the center of it was a drug that didn't just knock people out, it often left them with huge blanks in their memory. This is where we go inside that apartment. A typical victim walked in expecting something simple, a place to charge a phone, call a taxi, or crash for a few hours. The flat looked like a messy student room. Small, cluttered, clothes and bottles scattered around, bedding thrown on the floor. Nothing that screamed danger. Sinaga stayed calm and friendly. He'd offer a seat, make small talk, keep things casual. Then he'd offer a drink, vodka, a mixer, something strong. To a drunk, tired guest, it felt like normal hospitality from a kind stranger. They had no idea this was the moment his system really began. Investigators believe Sinaga often added a drug to those drinks, most likely GHB, or something very similar. GHB was first developed in the 1960s as an anesthetic and sedative. Outside medical settings, it has been used as a club drug and is often associated with drink spiking and sexual assault cases. When combined with alcohol, this kind of substance can have extremely dangerous effects, including extreme drowsiness, loss of control over movement, confusion and disorientation, unconsciousness, and severe gaps in memory. One of the most serious effects is anterograde amnesia. The brain struggles to form clear memories while the drug is active. People can appear semi-conscious and move or mumble, but later remember almost nothing. It can also be difficult to confirm after the fact because it leaves the body relatively quickly. So unless someone is tested soon, there may be little medical evidence. We don't know exactly how Sinaga obtained it or how he measured doses. What we do know is that victim after victim described the same pattern, accepting a drink, then losing huge chunks of the night. Once his victims were incapacitated, Sinaga followed the same pattern. He checked how impaired they were, watching their responses fade, then moved them onto a makeshift bed of duvets and blankets on the floor. Their clothing was removed, and he set up his phones. Police later discovered at least 2 devices in regular use, a white iPhone positioned to capture the room and a black iPhone for additional viewpoints. Some recordings ran for hours. One lasted around 8 hours, and in another, the same victim was harmed repeatedly over several hours. Towards the end of some footage, victims can be seen shifting or groaning, half waking but still heavily sedated. Many later remembered nothing at all. Others recalled only brief flashes with no context. The core truth is simple. He controlled the space, the timing, and what was recorded. His victims remembered almost none of it. When police searched his flat after his arrest, they didn't just find videos. They found other people's belongings, dozens of mobile phones, driving licenses, student ID cards, bank cards, wallets, and watches. These weren't items he needed, they were items he chose to keep. Investigators described them as trophies, souvenirs of men who often had no idea they'd been harmed. On his devices, they also found digital trophies, organized folders of video, still images, and notes. In some cases, Sinaga had searched for victims on social media and sent them friend requests later. Many accepted, assuming he was just someone they'd met on a night out. In WhatsApp chats, he shared photos of unconscious men on his floor and bragged about his encounters. Friends thought they were seeing drunk hookups, not evidence of serious crimes. To everyone around him, it looked like a busy dating life. To police, it was a catalogue of victims. By morning, most men woke up feeling awful, hungover, sick, disoriented, and with little or no memory of what happened after leaving the club. When they asked, Sinaga told the same story. He'd supposedly found them in a bad state outside and brought them in to keep them safe while they slept it off. Because they knew they'd been drinking heavily, that explanation felt believable. Many apologized, some thanked him, and at least one even joked by text about how drunk he'd been, suggesting they meet again, never realizing what had actually happened that night, or that any of it had been recorded. So why didn't this system collapse sooner? First, memory. Waking up with a pounding headache, a blank space in the night, and no idea what happened leaves almost nothing to tell police. Many of these men didn't even realize a crime had occurred. Second, stigma. For straight identifying men especially, the idea of being sexually assaulted by another man is surrounded by shame and confusion. Even when something felt off, a lot of them swallowed it, blamed the alcohol, and tried to move on. Third, evidence. By the time anyone might have sought help, any drug was likely out of their system. Bruises or soreness could be dismissed as the result of a heavy night. Without clear memories or obvious proof, they felt they had nothing solid to report. At least 2 men did try to raise alarms. One went to a sexual assault referral center. Another showed up at Sinaga's flatmate's door, worried something might have been done to him while he was unconscious. But neither incident led police to Sinaga at the time. So his system carried on. For roughly 2.5 years in the period covered by the charges, he lured men back, allegedly drugged and assaulted them, recorded what he was doing, and sent them home with no idea what had happened, until one night in June 2017, when a victim didn't stay unconscious. For over 2.5 years in the charge period, Sinaga's system went uninterrupted. Night after night, men went into his flat, blacked out, woke up confused, thanked him for helping, and left. But on a June morning in 2017, that routine finally broke. One man woke up, and he fought back. That brief moment of consciousness would expose years of hidden crimes. Let's walk through exactly what happened that night.
Metropolitan Police, what's your emergency?
The man making that call was an 18-year-old student who had just woken up in Reynhard Sinaga's flat, realizing something was terribly wrong. To understand how he got there, we need to go back to the night before. On the night of June 1st, 2017, an 18-year-old student and amateur rugby player went out in Manchester with friends. Like thousands of others, they moved between bars and clubs in the city center, eventually ending up near Factory Nightclub, just around the corner from Sinaga's flat on Princess Street. Sometime in the early hours, he became separated from his group. He'd been drinking, he was disoriented, and he found himself outside the club area trying to figure out how to get home. That's when he encountered Reynhard Sinaga. Just as he had done so many times before, Sinaga played the part of the concerned stranger. He approached the young man, spoke calmly, and offered help. Later in court, the young man would say that Sinaga told him he could come to his flat nearby to charge his phone, contact his friends, and rest for a bit. The young man agreed. The flat was close. Sinaga seemed harmless. Once inside the apartment, Sinaga offered him a drink. Prosecutors later told the court they believed that drink was spiked with GHB or a similar substance. The victim's memory essentially stops at that point. He doesn't remember finishing the drink. He doesn't remember lying down. He doesn't remember losing consciousness. The next thing he remembers is waking up. He comes to lying face down on the makeshift bed, his clothing disturbed and Sinaga behind him. In that instant, he realizes something is very wrong, that whatever happened while he was unconscious was not something he agreed to. What happens next is pure survival instinct. The young man pushes Sinaga away and a struggle breaks out, first in the bathroom, then spilling into the hallway. Sinaga shouts for help, at one point calling out words like help and intruder, trying to make it sound as if he's the one being attacked. But the rugby player is terrified and furious. He believes he's been sexually assaulted, and he lashes out, striking Sinaga multiple times. Sinaga is much smaller and in no state to fight back effectively. Eventually, he collapses to the floor, seriously hurt and barely responsive. The young man stands over him, shaking, breathless, and in shock. For a moment, he genuinely thinks he might have killed him. Panicking, he grabs what he thinks are his belongings, whatever is within reach, including a phone, and bolts out of the flat and onto Princess Street. Outside, the adrenaline starts to crash. The reality of what just happened begins to sink in. He woke up in a stranger's flat. He believes he found that man in the middle of a sexual assault. He fought back so hard he thought he'd killed him. Terrified and confused, he reaches out for help. He contacts his mom, he contacts the police. Around 6 a.m. on June 2nd, a 999 call comes in from a distressed young man saying he'd woken up to find someone attacking him and that he'd fought back in self-defense. Officers are dispatched to Montana House on Princess Street. When police arrive, they find a confusing scene. Inside the flat, they see a small man, Reynhard Sinaga, lying on the floor, barely conscious, seriously injured, with visible blood at the scene. He looks like the victim of a serious assault and is rushed to Manchester Royal Infirmary for emergency treatment. Nearby, they have an 18-year-old rugby player, bigger, stronger, with blood on his hands and injuries of his own, visibly distressed, telling them he fought in self-defense after waking up to an assault. Based on that snapshot alone, the situation looks straightforward: a violent altercation in a flat, one seriously injured man, and one young man who admits he was involved in the fight. They arrest the young man on suspicion of causing grievous bodily harm. He's taken into custody and held for around 11 hours. At this point, everyone believes they're dealing with an assault case with one aggressor and one victim. No one yet knows that Sinaga is at the center of one of the most serious sexual offense investigations in British history. Meanwhile, at the hospital, doctors focus on keeping Sinaga stable. His injuries are serious enough that staff are worried about possible internal damage. But amid all of this, the medical team noticed something strange. Despite his condition, Sinaga seems fixated on one thing: his mobile phone. He repeatedly asks where it is, who has it, whether it's been found. Given his state, That level of anxiety over a handset stands out. Hospital staff pass that detail to the officers handling the case. It reaches Detective Inspector Matt Gregory. Up until that moment, Gregory has every reason to believe this is just a serious assault on an injured victim. But the way Sinaga is obsessing over his phone makes him pause. If there's something on that device that matters more to Sinaga than his own recovery, it might be important. So Gregory decides to find it. Gregory returns to Montana House and searches Sinaga's flat. In the bedroom, he eventually finds a white iPhone hidden under the bed. He takes it and returns to the hospital. There, he asks Sinaga for the PIN. Sinaga first gives him an incorrect code. Only after further questioning does he provide a working one. When the phone unlocks, Gregory opens the photo and video gallery. What he sees is nothing like what he expected. On the screen are multiple video thumbnails. In each, he can see a young man lying face down or sprawled on bedding, apparently unconscious or extremely out of it. In the same frame, he sees Sinaga moving behind or beside them. Gregory taps one of the clips. Within seconds, he realizes he's watching a serious sexual assault on a man who is clearly in no state to consent. He stops the footage quickly, but he's seen enough to understand two crucial things. The young man they've arrested is very likely telling the truth. And Sinaga is not just a victim of an assault. He appears to be a serial sexual offender. In that moment, the entire case flips. The 18-year-old rugby player is no longer just a suspect. He is now recognized as a victim and a key witness. The man in the hospital bed is no longer just an injured party. He is now suspected of being at the center of a major sexual assault investigation. As Gregory scrolls further, he finds more videos. Different men, similar positions, the same apartment, the same pattern. The device in his hand isn't just a phone, it's evidence. After he's released from custody, the young man finally has a moment to breathe. As he checks his belongings, he reaches into his pocket and realizes something is off. One of the phones he's carrying isn't his. In the chaos of the fight and his frantic escape, he had unknowingly left Sinaga's flat with one of Sinaga's phones in his jeans, a black iPhone believed to be the device Sinaga used for close-up recordings. He could have ignored it. He could have thrown it away and tried to forget the whole ordeal. Instead, he does the one thing that will make him, in many ways, an accidental hero in this story. He hands the phone straight to the police. Now, detectives have not just one device full of incriminating footage, but two. Armed with that, they go back into Sinaga's flat for a deeper search and uncover even more: multiple hard drives and digital storage devices. In total, police recover over 3 terabytes of data, hundreds of hours of footage. Again and again, the videos show similar scenes. Men who appear to be unconscious or heavily sedated in the same small apartment, with Sinaga apparently carrying out serious sexual offenses against them on camera. It quickly becomes clear this isn't a case involving one victim or even 10. Detectives eventually conclude they are looking at least 195 men, and likely more than 200, most of whom had no idea what had been done to them. There's a grim irony to how Sinaga was finally exposed. The very thing he used to extend his control over victims, the obsessive filming, the need to record and relive what he was doing, became the thing that destroyed him. His own videos, saved on his own devices, would become the foundation of the case against him. That first phone, sitting in D.I. Gregory's hand in a hospital ward, opened a door. Behind it was one of the largest and most complex, serious sexual offense investigations Greater Manchester Police had ever undertaken. They called it Operation Island. Now detectives had to put names to faces in those videos. They had to track men down, sometimes years later, and tell them what had happened while they were unconscious. They had to support them through shock, disbelief, anger, and trauma. And they had to build a case so vast it would eventually require 4 separate trials to present. In the next section, we're going to look at how that investigation unfolded, how police gave identities to the unknown men in those videos, how Reynhard Sinaga responded when confronted with the evidence, and how the courts finally dealt with the man prosecutors would call the most prolific sexual offender in British legal history. The phone in Detective Inspector Matt Gregory's hand had opened the door. Operation Island was now underway. What started as one young man fighting back in a flat on Princess Street had become one of the largest and most complex serious sexual offense investigations Greater Manchester Police had ever faced. In this section, we're going to step away from that single night and look at the bigger picture, how detectives handled the sheer scale of the evidence, how they identified victims, how they told them the truth, and how the courts finally dealt with Reynhard Sinaga. By the time officers had finished seizing devices from Sinaga's flat, they weren't just dealing with 2 phones anymore. They had phones, laptops, USB sticks, and multiple external hard drives. In total, they recovered almost 3 terabytes of data, roughly the equivalent of hundreds of hours of video footage. When investigators began to review that material, a clear pattern emerged, clip after clip, shot in the same small apartment, showing men who appeared to be unconscious or barely responsive, with Sinaga in frame. Some recordings ran for hours. This wasn't just a handful of incidents. It was a digital archive of repeat offending documented on his own devices. The impact on the investigation team was significant. Officers and later jurors who had to view parts of the footage were offered specialist support and counseling because of how distressing the material was described as being. Sinaga had not only committed serious crimes, he had recorded them in meticulous detail, and that would become central to proving the case. Once detectives understood the scale of the archive, the next question was brutally simple. Who were the men in those videos? Operation Island became a painstaking identification mission. Investigators used every clue they could find. Clothing and appearance, branded t-shirts, club wristbands, tattoos, jewelry, physical items, phones, wallets, bank cards, driving licenses, and student IDs recovered from the flat, metadata, file names, timestamps, and dates embedded in the videos. Social media, cross-checking faces and nightlife locations on platforms like Facebook and Instagram. Local records, working with universities, employers, and other contacts to narrow down possible matches. Piece by piece, a list began to form. Police ultimately concluded that Sinaga had likely committed serious sexual offenses against at least 200 men, with some estimates putting the figure around 206. They believe around 70 of those men have never been positively identified. Of the men detectives were able to identify, 48 agreed to take part in the prosecution. Their experiences became the backbone of 4 separate trials. Identifying victims was only half the task. The next step was even harder, telling these men what had been discovered. Working with St. Mary's Sexual Assault Referral Center in Manchester and other specialist services, officers arranged to meet men either at home or in safe, neutral locations. They would explain, carefully and calmly, that they were investigating a serious sexual offender, and that there was evidence suggesting the person they were speaking to might have been one of his victims. Many of the men had no memory of an assault at all. At most, they remembered a bad night out, a blackout, waking up somewhere unexpected, feeling unwell and confused, Police then had to explain that there was video evidence. In some cases, they showed still images so the person could recognize themselves beyond doubt. Only when absolutely necessary would they discuss whether the victim wanted to see any footage, and many chose not to. The reactions varied. Some men broke down in tears, sat in stunned silence, reacted with anger, disbelief, or outright denial, described intense shame, even though they had done nothing wrong. For many, the trauma came not from remembering an assault, but from learning, sometimes years later, that it had happened at all. A number of victims went on to seek counseling and long-term mental health support. Some spoke about relationship difficulties, problems with trust and intimacy, and feeling as if their lives had been split into before and after being told the truth. Because of the sheer number of victims and charges, the case couldn't be presented in a single courtroom session. Prosecutors split it into 4 separate trials at Manchester Crown Court, held between 2018 and 2019. Across those trials, Sinaga faced 159 serious sexual offenses, including multiple counts of rape, attempted rape, sexual assault, and related charges. Sinaga pleaded not guilty to all charges. His defense was that these encounters were consensual role play, and that the men had agreed to be filmed while pretending to be unconscious. The videos, medical evidence about the effects of the suspected drug, and the victims' accounts told a very different story. Juries in all 4 trials rejected his explanation and convicted him on all counts. In January 2020, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 30 years. Later that year, the Court of Appeal increased that minimum to 40 years, the longest minimum term ever imposed for a case of this kind in England and Wales at the time. Sinaga is currently held at HMP Wakefield and will not even be eligible to be considered for release until he is in his late 70s. Even after the trials ended, the case didn't simply disappear. Once reporting restrictions were lifted and Sinaga's name became public, more men came forward, some already known to police, others who had never previously realized their experiences might be linked to his offending. Charities supporting male survivors of sexual assault reported spikes in calls and referrals. The case forced a wider conversation in the UK about how rarely male sexual assault is discussed, how shame and stigma stop men from reporting, how easily predators can exploit assumptions about who looks dangerous. For the men affected, the core reality was simpler. The person who harmed them had finally been identified, prosecuted, and removed from the community. In the next section, we'll step back from the timeline and look at what this case reveals about power, vulnerability, and the blind spots that allowed someone like Reynhard Sinaga to hide in plain sight for so many years, and what questions still remain. The courts convicted Reynhard Sinaga. He's serving a life sentence with a record-breaking minimum term. But even after 4 trials, some of the hardest parts of this case are the things we still don't know. Police believe he targeted at least 200 men. Around 60 of them appear in his video evidence, but have never been identified. No names, no contact details, no way to reach them. Some of those men might remember a blackout in Manchester. Others may remember nothing at all. They're living their lives right now, not realizing they were victims of one of the most prolific sexual offenders in British legal history. There were also moments that, in hindsight, look like missed chances. A man who went to a sexual assault center months earlier after waking up sore and confused. A flatmate who saw drunk men coming and going and once had someone knock on the door asking if he'd been assaulted. No one person failed to stop Sinaga, but together these pieces raise a painful question. How many red flags do we miss because we don't expect a predator to look like this? The case also forced a conversation that almost never happens: male sexual assault. After Sinaga's name became public, Support organizations reported more men reaching out for help, some assaulted recently, others who had stayed silent for years. This story challenged the idea that men are always safe, always in control, always able to fight back. It showed that shame and silence are some of the most powerful tools an offender can exploit. In the end, that's what this case leaves us with. Predators don't look like monsters. Male victims are real. And sometimes, one person waking up at the right moment and refusing to stay quiet can expose years of hidden harm. If you or someone you know has experienced sexual assault, there are people who will believe you and support you. In the UK, you can reach out to groups like Survivors, Manchester, or Safeline. You are not alone. And what happened to you is not your fault.